In the first part of this series, we covered the fact that child support is a misnomer. It does not consider the needs of the child. We're going to get into that a little bit further in this part here. We also covered that if you fall behind on your daddy tax, you will be treated worse than a criminal. We covered that over 100,000 men a year are locked up in America for not paying their daddy tax. And we also found out that $20 billion a year is taken from men and given to women. And that's a huge amount. And there's also a $100 billion industry that surrounds child support collections. But let's dive a little bit deeper. 74% of all daddy tax collections come through wage withholding orders. The Office of Child Support Enforcement keeps a database of all those who must pay daddy tax, and all employers must comply with any income withholding order. Each employer must withhold daddy tax from an employee and then separately send all employer withhold payments for daddy tax to the State Disbursement Unit, or SDU. This is an added inconvenience for employers. And given the choice between two equal candidates for a job, an employer will always pick the one who requires less hassle. Daddy tax can keep candidates from getting jobs, and sometimes cost employees jobs due to the trouble and extra work for the employer. An employer can be heavily fined for failure to send in daddy tax money. That's something that a lot of employers just don't want to deal with. There are over 80,000 people who work for the government agency called the Office of Child Support Enforcement in America. Now, this figure does not include the thousands of judges and court personnel who hold the hearings on child support and create the orders. Nor does it include the thousands of law enforcement personnel who arrest, detain, and process daddy tax offenders. 1 out of every 4 children in America is currently under the umbrella of the OCSE, the Office of Child Support Enforcement. That is 25% of the children in America. This number continues to grow every year, and I can honestly see a point in the not too distant future where all children will be enrolled at the OCSE at birth. The 80,000 government employees who work for the Office of Child Support Enforcement are collection agents. They are the ones who collect and transfer the money from the fathers to someone else. 80,000 collection agents. Do you know how many people who work at the Office of Child Support Enforcement or any other government agency are there to ensure that the daddy tax collected is actually spent on support of the child? You know, that thing called child support? How many government employees actually ensure that children are having child support payments applied to their support? 0. Zip. Nada. There is not one person in the federal or state government who ensures that child support money is spent on supporting the child. Not one single person. Yet there are tens of thousands of government employees who are tasked with hunting down and forcing fathers to pay. That is why I call it a daddy tax. And that's why I laugh at anyone who claims that child support is all about the children. It is a government program designed to take money from fathers by threat of incarceration. The government uses every tool it has to ensure that the money is taken from fathers, but absolutely zero oversight into how the money is spent. Child support has absolutely nothing to do with supporting children. So the courts do not look at a child's needs when ordering support, nor do the courts ensure that the money collected is spent on support of the child. Calling it child support is, as George Orwell said, political language designed to make lies sound truthful and murder respectable. A mother can claim any man as the father of her child and start collecting daddy tax. There have been thousands of men who have found out years later, usually by being arrested and charged with contempt of court, that they have been assigned daddy tax and are tens of thousands of dollars in arrears. It is not unusual for unwed mothers to claim a number of different men as the father of a child. The court then proceeds to apply the daddy tax to all of these men, usually without their knowledge. Even if a child has been found to not be biologically a man's child, the courts will still not relieve him of the obligation to pay his monthly daddy tax. The government has decided that the needs of the child overrule any needs of a man. A man's civil rights and liberty are forfeited by the perceived needs of the child by the government, even if that child is not his. In 2006, 14-year-old Nick Olivas was raped by a 20-year-old woman in Phoenix, Arizona. It was statutory rape, as Arizona state law says that a child younger than 15 cannot consent with an adult for sex under any circumstance. Of course, the woman was never convicted, even though there was 100% proof that a rape occurred, because in 2012, 6 years after the rape, Nick Olivas was handed a $15,000 daddy tax bill, which had been accruing for 6 years. Nick never even knew that he had a child from the intercourse. There is no obligation in America for a woman to inform a man that he is a father and has children. They can lie and say that a child is a man's when it is not, or they can lie and say that a child is not his when it is. They can hide a pregnancy and never tell the father. There are no repercussions to any of these actions. In Nick's case, the state tracked him down. He was the rape victim, yet they seized his bank accounts, garnished his wages with threats of incarceration if he did not pay the balance in full. The state has forced a rape victim to pay a tax to his rapist or face the consequence of being jailed. Now, this happens more than people are made aware of. The legal case Hermesman versus Sire in the Kansas Supreme Court is a precedent-setting case that says a woman is entitled to sue the father of her child for child support, even if conception occurred as a result of a criminal act committed by the woman. Incentives matter. In all of life, in every decision made, incentives matter. Child support is a huge incentive for women to divorce. The vast majority of divorces are initiated by women with children. Something along the lines of 70% of divorces are initiated by women who have children. They know that they will get the kids as well as a monthly check taken from the father at the point of a gun. The father then becomes a visitor in his children's lives if he's lucky. His ability to influence them and have a say in their lives is greatly diminished, if not completely removed. The state forcefully removes him from his children, restricts his time with them, and actually controls when and where he can see them, and then forces him under the threat of incarceration to pay money every month. Usually it is an amount of money that is a great burden, if not completely unattainable. For the women, the money is effortlessly put onto a debit card that she is free to spend on anything she wants. It is not mandated to go for the support of the child at all. And to top it off, it is totally tax-free. A woman does not have to report child support money on any financial statement ever. It is untouchable income by anyone except her. She can claim poverty, reside in government housing, get food stamps and government support, all while receiving $50,000 a month in daddy tax payments. Child support is untaxed, unreported, 100% free money to spend on anything they wish. That is an enormous incentive to divorce a man. But child support is not only for mothers. Anyone from a grandparent to foster parents to state institutions can gain custody of a father's children and then force him to pay daddy tax. And one thing I think women are going to learn is that the government will eat everyone in sight. This is a big dog that has to eat more and more each day. Women have created a monster with this child support system that they will not be able to control. It will turn on them eventually. But that's another subject for another day. And while we're on the topic of incentives, states have a huge incentive to put as many fathers into their daddy tax system as possible for a multitude of reasons. Besides the fact that it supports many thousands of government jobs, each state is given a bonus every year by the federal government to spend however they wish based on the amount of money they have collected in daddy tax for that year. Most states receive millions as a bonus, and this can go to anything from new cars to swimming pools for government employees. The state has also an incentive to make daddy tax unreasonably high to encourage default on payments. States collect interest on unpaid balances that the state gets to keep. The interest does not go to the mothers. Plus, any daddy taxes collected by the state that has not been claimed within a year become the property of the state. Usually, this amounts to about 20% of all child support going straight to the coffers of the state. Child support is very, very lucrative for states. I stated earlier that if a child dies, the father is still held liable for daddy taxes. This is also the case if he gets custody or the mother dies, leaving him as the custodian of the child. The father must continue to pay the state even if the child does not exist, if the child has died or the father has retained custody of the child. Until the father has filed the appropriate paperwork and proven in court that the child is dead or that child support is no longer applicable because he now has custody, the father can be incarcerated for not paying. Lionel Campbell paid child support for 25 years for a child that died at the age of 3 years old of acute meningitis. The Bradley Amendment, passed in 1986, claims that courts are prohibited to retroactively reduce any child support obligation. It specifically states that a non-expiring lien will automatically happen the moment a child support payment becomes past due. It requires that payments must be paid without regard for the physical capability of the person owing child support, and it disallows child support to be discharged by bankruptcy judges, and it removes all statute of limitations, meaning back daddy taxes will be collected forever, can never be discharged, and can never be retroactively modified once owed. So even though Lionel Campbell's child had died at the early age of 3 years old, the state forced him to pay for the next 25 years. The state took his money for 25 years because he had the audacity to be a father whose child died. So why do I say that child support is evil? Let's review everything. Mothers have an incentive to get the state to separate their husbands from the family in order to collect tax-free, unreported, unearned monthly income in the form of child support. The government can charge any man with this daddy tax and then arbitrarily demand an amount that, unless he pays monthly, he will have his life ruined in every way possible, including being thrown into a box. The government has highly profited from this action, and a mega billion-dollar industry has sprouted around it. The needs of the father are never a factor, nor his physical ability to pay. A man can be in a coma, but will still be required to pay. He could be held captive as a prisoner of war in a foreign land, but still be required to pay. This has happened. There is never any reason ever that can stop the government from collecting daddy tax. The government will assign a monthly tax on the father at any amount the government in its sole discretion decides, and then force the father, under threat of incarceration, to pay no matter what. If child support laws causing so much harm to men, families, and society is not considered evil, then I would have to say that evil simply does not exist. There is not much worse for a parent than to have their children taken from them. But to not only remove children from fathers, but to then force fathers to pay money every month or be imprisoned for those very same children taken, I cannot think of too many things more evil than that. So in conclusion, daddy tax gives mothers an incentive to divorce. Daddy tax amount is decided arbitrarily by the courts and has no bearing whatsoever on the needs of the child, but instead it is based on how much money the father can make, has made, ever will make. They basically pull a number out of their hats. The courts have an incentive to unduly burden fathers with daddy tax. Almost, it's somewhere in the area of 70% of fathers ordered to pay child support are in arrears. It's a huge amount, and it's designed that way. They want you to fall behind. Daddy tax cannot be retroactively reduced, even due to gross errors and negligence by the state. Daddy tax can and is ordered against men who are not biological fathers of the child. Daddy tax can and is enforced against fathers whose children have died. Daddy tax can and is enforced against fathers who have custody of their children. And then incentives matter. Daddy tax is a mega billion-dollar industry that is incentively designed to separate men from their children and then extort them for money. Inability to pay the court's arbitrarily mandated daddy tax will have a man treated worse than a criminal. Over 100,000 men a year are locked up in a box for not being able to pay their court-ordered daddy tax. Over $20 billion a year is transferred from men to women through daddy taxes. This is completely untouchable money. This is unearned, untaxed, completely free. They do what they want with this. They don't have to report it on their incomes. You hear all these stories about women in poverty and how after divorces, women are more likely to be in poverty than the man. Dad, that's because they don't have to report their daddy tax. If they did, they wouldn't be considered in poverty. You take a football player who has to pay $50,000 a month to the baby's mama. She doesn't have to report that. As far as the state and everybody on the planet is concerned, she does not get that money. That money is not put on any financial statements. That's money. That's free money for her to spend. She's not taxed on it, and she doesn't have to report it anywhere. Of course she's in poverty. She's making $50,000 a month, or she's given 50. She ain't making it. She's given $50,000 a month. Daddy tax can never be discharged through bankruptcy or any other means. And male rape victims can and are required to pay daddy tax. Child support is evil in every sense of the word. An unconscionable act of not paying your monthly daddy tax. And how does the government decide how much you need to pay for your monthly daddy tax?